Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of Playful Subversions. This episode, I'm going to be speaking with Brittany Robertson. And let me give you a little bio of Brittany before we start. Brittany Robertson, LICSW, MSW, BFA, RYT 200, is an integrative psychotherapist, yoga teacher, and poet who practices in Massachusetts. She specializes in deep relational healing for, quote, the strong, sensitive one. Centered on embodiment and liberation, her work lives at the intersection of grief, complex trauma, somatics, and the empowered art of coming home to oneself. As a yoga teacher, Brittany's practice is rooted in sensation, present, adaptive, and guided by the wisdom that the body always knows exactly what's up. In her classes and sessions alike, she offers space to soften into safety, to loosen grip, to witness yourself as beautifully messy, and to explore what becomes possible when we attune with curiosity and let things flow. Brittany has been described as being intensely passionate about being intensely passionate. She loves many things immensely, including her people, her senior dog, Jack, holding the serious and the silly in the same hand, and swimming in the sea. You can learn more about Brittany and her vibe at Brittany Robertson Therapy and her yoga class at Be in Union Studio in Somerville, Mass. And I will post those at the end of our podcast. So, Brittany, welcome.
Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
So the one of the fun things about starting with these introductions so that people hear how kind of accomplished guests are is that you then get to undercut it by saying, hey, we're not here to talk with you about any of that today, although it might come up. We're here to talk about trampolining, if that's the right term.
I think so. Well, the object being the mini trampoline, it's directly to my left here.
I'm not sure if
So
we
it's
can see it, but
I'll leave it off camera. It's with the in the abyss of my other wellness things that I have over here. So
so how long have you been trampolining?
well, I got my first one. I've gone through two. This is now my second because I broke the first one for being too intense on it. But I got the first one in the early days of the pandemic after my dear friend Dana, who's one of my most playful friends, got a mini trampoline for herself to just help self-regulate, being trapped inside. She lives in Los Angeles in her studio apartment and wasn't leaving that much to go on walks or anything like that, and was really finding that she was not in her body, but feeling a lot of feelings. And she's like, I'm going to get this mini trampoline, even though it's completely not practical for the very small space that I'm in. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. I would get one too, but it doesn't, again, seem practical or like another thing to add to my very small apartment. So she convinced me to, it didn't take much convincing, but I got one and I immediately became addicted to it. I was like, oh, I'm going to spend all day on here. I'm like sending emails while jumping on it. And originally I was using it mostly to work out and like do high intensity interval training in the confines of my apartment, which is how I broke the first one just by being too intense on it. But eventually it just graduated to becoming a part of how I would regulate in between sessions when I was doing a lot of back-to-back sessions. I was doing back-to-back like 30-minute sessions at my previous job when I worked at a hospital, just like no time in between because I would always run over. I was always running late and I didn't have time to take care of myself in between sessions. So I would just like hop on it for literally a minute sometimes just to ground myself. And yeah, it just became a really essential tool. There's other components of it that have evolved over time, but that was the original foundation of how I came to it.
Hmm. Okay, so we're talking you're in lockdown and you're doing virtual sessions and you're
Well,
on the mini trampoline.
yeah, so I was in the final stages of my graduate studies in 2020. So graduated, went into working, was doing field work. Like I was out in the field, but then also eventually ended up transitioning into a hospital job where I wasn't physically there all the time, but was doing these. I was in integrative behavioral health, so I was doing a lot of back-to-back, very short sessions, and sometimes seeing 9, 10 people
Mm,
just in very quick succession. And so I started doing the mini trampolining in between as a way to kind of practice what I preach of like be in your body, but I was feeling so disconnected. And it just became this element of my routine that I gripped onto very tightly.
mm.
And even now, it's just like I will be brushing my teeth, doing some of my best thinking while just like mindlessly bouncing on the trampoline, but being in my body. So it's just a way for me to return into my self energy while
Mm.
I'm moving through my life, but also most importantly when I'm working with folks.
So let's talk for a minute, and then I'm going to ask you maybe for giving more of a detailed description of the mini trampoline. But first, can you talk about the moment or moments? Was there a moment when you sort of realized, hey, I am like not practicing what I preach here. I am telling people they need to be in their body, and I am just not present.
Oh, I mean, I could probably think of many examples, but I think that realization probably came to me slowly. It's like this creeping feeling of being in session with people, trying to be present
Mm,
and struggling and feeling that sort of like pull of I'm saying one thing, but feeling completely disconnected from my own experience of the very thing that we're talking about.
mm,
And really encouraging people to be deep in their bodies and feeling and tuning back to instant sensation. Meanwhile, I'm feeling like this disembodied head.
mm,
I think a part of that, and this is something I've, thought about deeply in my own healing is just like through graduate school and then early days of my career feeling like so attached to being taken seriously
mm,
and knowing my stuff and like gripping very tightly to control and being
mm,
like no, I'm going to work within this framework and this is what I just really feeling a lot of guardedness around being taken seriously and falling under the spell of seriousness. Meanwhile, like there is this very like silly, light component to my energy that I felt like, oh, if I bring that into this space, that's not going to be welcomed. I need to be perfect and on point all the time, not revealing myself as like being human or like even having a body like
mhm,
that would be a part of it too of like oh I have to be very contained all the time like that
mm,
was always the felt sense. So I think and again I was working in a very stressful like sort of like urgent emergent day-to-day very energetically intense environment where I had a pager. I had like there was just a lot of momentum always. And I think that really, there was a huge part of me that I love to be adrenalized,
mm, mhm,
and felt very attached to that. And again, originally, I think the trampoline was an extension of that,
mm,
of like, oh, I could just like jump all the time and like get my energy out, instead of having it be the grounded meditative thing that it eventually became. But the disconnect was slow growing for me of like, oh, I'm feeling very far from my self energy and very far from these things that I'm talking about in session. But yeah, it was one of those moments where you have to get like radically honest with yourself.
mm,
And part of that for me was like leaving the previous job that I had that was contributing to that disconnect of like
mhm,
not feeling aligned with the work that I was doing because I was so addicted to being needed and things being urgent and in emergency mode all the time. And I had to be very honest with myself about that not being where I did my best work.
mm,
So since I opened up my own practice and working for myself, I am I'm in charge of regulating that. So
mhm,
there's another layer that's come in of like, oh, now you actually do have the time and space to incorporate everything that you've been talking about. So you better do it. And the trampoline is just a small component of that. So to long story short with that answer, but it was a slow realization for me, and then putting all of the structural things around around my life to support be feeling more aligned.
Mm,
That took a little more time from that initial um, seed of, uh-oh, I'm detached from my sense of play and the silly embodied part of myself that I think is most effective actually for me when I'm working with people and encouraging them to return to that
mm,
same energy within themselves.
mm. So you're naming something that I name for me that I think may be another way of describing what you're discussing, which is there are times when we are either in, challenging practice settings. I'm thinking when I was a public school social worker and, doing back-to-back home visits or dealing with a crisis or going from one thing to the next, that actually was where I was getting adrenaline and where I was getting sort of the dopamine, right? Not the actual work in the moment with the patient, but getting to the appointment, parking the car and getting to the meeting on time. And that it took a while for me to realize that, hey, I want to be excited by what's going on in the session, not the framework of all of it. And I think about for early trainees, and I think about career professionals who never quite consciously discover that what they're getting activated or excited by is actually getting to work rather than the work. And that in fact, we want it to be different, right? We don't want to be getting a high off of, wow, I checked off all these things. I made all these appointments. I got all of my notes done, right? And yet sometimes I think that's what, because it is urgent, because, corporations and bosses demand that, that's where we start to get that thrill.
I completely completely agree and resonate with that deeply. There being like this massive incentive of oh, if I check everything off, then I will feel it will, the end result will be this feels fulfilling. And
Hmm.
but there's always more,
Hmm.
right? And then, the other disconnect that I was experiencing is like, oh, here I am. I'm saying that I hold these values. I believe in this. Um, and then, meanwhile, the internal checklist that I have for myself is you are only worthy if you complete all this. And the only way you feel alive is if you're generalized
Hmm.
around all this stuff and like getting I thought I didn't care about external validation, right? I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
I don't care about I like I'm doing this because I believe in the work and the human element that is driving me here. And it
Hmm.
just got so corrupted by this little itch of, oh, like this feels activating and enlivening when I'm
Hmm.
doing this, when really what's happening is I'm getting just absolutely disconnected from myself in this mode of always doing. And,
Hmm.
I think unless you have support or people around you that are calling that in and being like, hey, no, this is not sustainable,
Hmm.
which in my experience, the system is never going to do for us.
Right.
Um, so I feel very grateful that early on in when I was in graduate school, I had a supervisor who very early on in our work together recognized that I was getting in that mode and did her best to draw me out. And
Hmm.
part of that, it was less what she said, more me observing her practice that with herself. She was the supervisor in a residential treatment program. And
Mm.
so it could be, the day could become very small
Hmm.
and like very insulated. And I would be like, when I was there doing my internship, I like wanted to do a good job and I wanted to be like constantly available. And she would come down because my office was like, in the corner
Hmm.
at the end of the hall. She would come down, she'd be like, I haven't seen you leave the building today. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, no, you didn't. I think I popped outside and got some fresh air. But she really called me in and she was like, I'm going on a walk. Like,
Would you like to
you
come?
no, no, more of a demand.
Mm.
She'd be like forcefully maternal and be
Mm.
like, hey, you're getting outside. We're not doing this. And
Mm.
you know, it took me a long time to come full circle on those lessons, and I think I'm still very much in process with learning how to ease off that internalized capitalism
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and productivity and just this really, really strong attachment to being good all the time and dutiful and completing everything and doing it, at 100% of what the system expects and then some, and then there being very little left over for myself or clients at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. So, but yeah, she really showed me early on how to start resisting that pull. I feel it as this like energetic, like it
Mm-hmm.
sucks you in, like it's so alluring to
Mm-hmm.
believe that that's going to be sustainable for us, and it just isn't. At least in my experience.
Mm-hmm. I think you're a little bit younger than me, and I know some of our audience are therapists that are early career or younger therapists. And so I'm going to throw in another piece here, which is I do think that part of this is sort of a professional life cycle development thing that a lot of us don't unfortunately end up learning. But one of the things that I'm remembering when I was in my early 20s and really doing my first few jobs, there was this part of me that was almost, I don't know if it was dissociative or but looking at myself going, look at me, I am being an adult, I'm doing an adult things, look at me commuting, hey, I'm swinging by Starbucks before that home visit, I am an adult. And that sort of kind of mirroring that in weird ways capitalism really kind of grooms us for, right? It's like, hey, join the ranks of working adults, we all get to groan about our commute, or that sort of frame I think is something that um people really can solidify in their early stage of career and without good supervision or without peers that are outliers. Because think about, like, if a whole bunch of 20 something clinicians are getting together, they're like talking about how training, candidacy, analysis, their own supervision, and nobody goes, hey, let's go for a walk, right? Let's get out of being like, look at us being adults. And so I don't know if that at all resonates with your experience, but I do think for many people there's this sort of developmental identity component coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a little bit of so my background is in the arts. So I got my BFA undergrad. I did theater arts and writing, and that was like the path that I was on. I was like 25 before I was, I hit that 25 mark, and I'm like, oh man, I had done yoga teacher training, so I was in that world. I was getting curious about my own healing and had this amazing therapist who inspired me indirectly to go to graduate school. But that what I do see that now, that in my 30s as a marker of like, okay, I need to become a real adult.
Mm,
And I have no regrets about choosing to go to grad school, the path that I'm on now, with that being the catalyst. But I had this sort of chip on my shoulder at 26, 27 of, oh, I'm coming into this late
hmm
because my undergrad wasn't in psychology or social work. So I'm at a disadvantage. And then I get my cohort and I'm the youngest one, and I was
hmm
like, oh, and I was so inspired by, I had some colleagues in my cohort that were complete career change in their 50s, like had been lawyers or educators or something else, and they had decided to go back to school for social work. So I had the benefit of learning from them and their life experience and seeing the many different pathways that we could like, become involved in this work. But then it was more so when I was in my field work, when I was at my first big hospital job, that I felt that pull of, oh, I got to behave. I
hmm
got to be exceptional because I'm coming into this. And I feeling a little bit fraudulent, like, oh, they're not gonna like value these parts about myself that are more playful or experiential, or eventually, as I started to do more work, I found that those things were the magic that allowed me to be effective as a
hmm
clinician, but nothing in the environment was supporting that. And I would find that when I'd like speak up about something or like be like, hey, like this is like, this is not good, met with the blank stare or like, this is the way it is. There was a sort of like, passiveness to
Mm,
the system. And I think a lot of that, I'm thinking in particular about, the last position and environment that I was working in. I think a lot of people really burnt out from
mm,
the pandemic and just the demand, and working in public health
mm,
is not it's those are not easy days, and trying to find meaning in that sometimes can be in the camaraderie of like, oh, we're all suffering,
mhm,
and
mhm,
then everyone becomes like very, very entrenched in that conversation. But I found that like that contributed to me feeling like I was losing hope
mhm,
and becoming unmoored in the work. And not that I felt like I wasn't still, I still had access to myself, but I felt like sometimes when I would be in community with other clinicians or on our team, there was just sort of like this Groundhog Day element of like, this is what we're doing today, and
mhm,
nothing's ever going to get better. And you feel less able to externalize the hope that you're feeling that something better can happen, because people just get so flattened by the system. And I felt myself trying to like
mhm,
kind of get out of that or kind of help other people while we were still there. I'm like, no, like let's change things while we're here. Like I became adrenalized around that as
mhm,
well, of like,
mhm,
no, we got to change things. I tried to do a few things within my team to try to anchor people to some sense of community or feeling connected to like not just our shared suffering. And then eventually, like actually me leaving was the best thing that I could
mhm,
do
mhm,
for both my friendship and connection with my former colleagues in that environment, but also importantly for myself and the sustainability of the work. But absolutely, like for a very long time felt like I had something to prove to
mhm,
not myself, but the system, that I was worthy of being there.
mhm,
But nothing in the work that I was doing with clients was like reflecting that they loved the system. It was, they were coming back to get, human-centered care
mhm,
from me and the other clinicians that were there, that were really the driving force of what was going on, even though we were not well supported. But
mhm,
that's a very common story, I think, and the world becomes very small when that ends up being our work, and when people who are more senior are getting sucked under the wheel as well and not able to reach out or reach back towards the younger clinicians and be like, no, we can make it different.
mhm, mhm.
So
Well, leaving is what makes it can make it different, right? I mean,
yeah.
part of what you're talking about is sort of what Winnicott talks about in terms of compliance and how it really stifles creativity in life. And you're sort of painting a really interesting and sort of depressing picture of like all of these folks, patients and therapists and administrators alike, complying and like the light going out, but people like trying to get some humanness. And so, let's go somewhere more fun than that depressing image. You escaped. You are a real adult, and real adults, it turns out, play with trampolines. So describe what this trampoline is and how you use it.
So it's a mini trampoline. Unfortunately, it's not a full-fledged outdoor expansive trampoline, but that it has like, well, I have one of the ones that has, you can get ones that have like the metal springs on them, but I don't, the sensory experience of that is not as pleasant for me, and like I don't like the like crunching sound that sometimes
Okay.
sometimes have with that. But I have like the one that has like really thick rubber attaching the mat to the actual metal apparatus that is the structure of it. So you can like, there are ones that you can get that you can fold up to kind of put in a closet, although I don't know how that would work.
Hmm.
But it's, it's, I think it can hold up to 400 pounds, and you can really, I've had this one now for like 3 years, and I've put a lot of miles on it. But as a kid, I like dreamed about having a trampoline. I saw this meme once. It was like, what you don't get as a child is like,
Hmm.
what or what it's some joke about attachment, and it's like, I dream about trampoline. Like I just always wanted like the sensory freedom of being on a trampoline, but I had a very anxious mother who did not want to invite that into our lives or our backyard, which I understand as an adult. But and also my brother had injured his knee on our cousin's trampoline, so there was all this like fear and trauma around the trampoline. So, but I realized as an adult, like I can do what I want. And I live in Somerville, so I don't have a ton of space in our very small shared backyard for a full-size trampoline.
Hmm.
So the mini one was my concession to myself. But yeah, I feel, and thinking about it more deeply in preparation for this conversation, I was like, what is it about the trampoline? And I think it's like there is a sense of play that it allows me to access that in thinking again about the spell of seriousness that I fell under.
Mm.
It really allows me to very quickly rejoin with the playful, free spirit within me that wants to just jump around and dream and think and be in my body and like have that feedback loop happening. And I find that when I'm on it and I'm not like when I'm trying to do other things while I'm on it, there is a certain amount of disconnect because we can't really like be in body and answer emails at the same time. But it does allow me to have some sort of conversation with my body, even if I'm doing something else. And yeah, every recovering perfectionist or like high intensity person that I know, I recommend that they get one because even though you're moving while you're on it, I do think it helps, at least for me anyway, like deprogram this sense of urgency because I'm just
Mm.
bouncing around. I'm not really like I'm not power walking. Like my default mode network is like go, 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 go. So I have to
Mhm.
actively bring myself back down, like
Mm.
slow it down. And like in my own therapy work, that's like a felt sense I really work with of like lightening it up, loosening the grip, like that's that sort of expansive energy. I find that when I'm on the trampoline, I'm quite literally not constricted,
Mhm.
right? So I'm like flowing around, I can put my arms up. So there's this freedom that it facilitates that, yeah, you can access while like dancing or walking or, yoga, obviously, but there's something about having like the floor or like the metaphorical earth of the trampoline supporting that buoyancy
Mm.
that does something, it shifts things more quickly for me anyway, where it's like it literally is giving me the feedback of you're limitless. There's a lot to work with here energetically. But again, without this sort of like urgency of, oh, I'm running, or I'm doing something high intensity. And again, it started as that. It started as, I don't know if you've ever seen any videos of people doing like the rebounding workouts where
Mhm.
they're holding onto a bar. I don't have a bar on mine, but you can get like a balance bar. And there are people that like are doing like flips and tricks on it. I am not using it for that. I have like an extreme avoidance around injuring my neck in any way. So
Mhm.
I'm not doing any of that. I'm just like really trying to be in my body, in my own energy that's feeding back off the trampoline and just trying to access a flow state that I think
Mm.
is
Mhm.
difficult to access when we are, encumbered by responsibility, some days more so than others. So it's just a way for me to re-access myself pretty quickly. Um, and the playful energy that I'm trying to claw my way back to.
Well, I'm thinking about, you were talking about dance, you were talking about other sorts of movement, and and I'm not privileging one form of movement or movement as play over another, because I think there's an element of play in dance and an element of play in power walking or running. But what I think I'm picking up about trampoline is you're not getting anywhere. There's no progress. You're not going to go 5 miles. You're just bouncing literally up and down. And although dance isn't necessarily that linear, a lot of dance as a performance has a beginning, middle, and an end. And there's not like I don't imagine there's like a time where you're like, okay, we're coming to the end of the bouncing. Like it just seems like it's not got some of the trappings of progress.
Yeah, I think. again, in thinking about like what is it about the trampoline that is different than because I am very committed to other forms of movement, and embodiment is a huge part of, how I care for myself, how I practice in our work. And but you're spot on where it's not I'm really, really having to detangle that attachment to,
Mhm.
oh, I did this. And
Mhm.
it's like, no, this is just what's happening right now. And we're
Mhm.
not going anywhere. And yet you're still here and worthy.
Mhm.
And it's like, you could be like, oh, it's not that deep, but like everything is when we when we
Mhm.
pull it back a little bit. And um, sense of play is something that has been so precarious for me,
Mhm.
where it became like there became this chasm between like how I saw myself, how I wanted others to see me, and then things that I associated with play or being childlike or silly or frivolous or like, oh, that's not productive.
Mhm.
And it's like, I'm actually able to be way more productive meaning for me anyway, meaningful embodied work, not
Mhm.
like productive for the machine. But it has facilitated that for me. And yeah, I'm not like really doing much of anything. Sometimes when I'm bouncing on it, my feet aren't even leaving. I'm just like pressing my weight through my heels. So
Mm.
you like it's a very accessible form of embodiment in that like if you can stand upright, even with the balance of you, if you have the bar, it's like low pressure on your joints. So, and I love swimming and I love being in the water as well. Like or just adjacent to the water, but I don't in my daily life have access to that. But the same sort of buoyancy that you experience when you're swimming,
Mhm.
I find anyway, there is a parallel experience on the trampoline where it's just like weightless, flowing, but quite literally not going anywhere, but internally really descending into the body in a way that yeah, it just facilitates every little moment of flow I have for the rest of the day. Like I start my day on it, I brush my teeth on it. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. I'm like on the trampoline bouncing. And it's just a way to like transition from
Mhm.
one thing to the other for me.
Can you say more about the idea of descending into the body? That's such a powerful image.
Yeah, I think my experience has been, especially when I went to grad school and then like early years of my career, this felt sense I was having of like being severed. And
Mm.
for me, even still, I feel like I hold a lot here. Like there's a lot of resistance I have to descending because it's like I have this allegiance to everything that's contained up here. I'm like, no, this is where the answer is.
Mm. Mm.
And I find that when I'm in my body and I'm not trying to override that information with thinking that I know better or thinking that if I can source it externally, then I will have it all figured out. Um, that when I do things that facilitate me tuning back in and not forcefully,
Mm.
like again, that's how I broke the first trampoline of being like, oh, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this and like quite literally breaking the spring and like falling
Mm.
through the mat,
Mm.
it's like you, going down quickly and forcefully is not it's not the path,
Mm.
right? All your protective mechanisms are going to resist that because that's not safe and that's not a respectful way of engaging
Mm.
um, with the wisdom of your body. So just gently bouncing on the trampoline allows me to kind of like, especially when I'm starting my day and I'm like, okay, you're here, you're in your body. I'm tracking it. I'm not looking at
Mm.
my phone and brushing my teeth. I'm like, yes, I'm brushing my teeth, but I'm thinking about, I'm like, okay, where are things living right now?
Mm.
What can I breathe into? Even as I'm thinking about it, my nervous system triggered a
Mm.
breath, right? Because I'm like
Mhm.
noticing now, okay, there's some
Mm.
tension here because I slept like this. And can I honor that instead of resisting it? And like, again, with the energy of like constriction and then getting more expansive with it when I'm descending in my body, at least this is my experience, is that I do come up against that constriction of like,
Mm.
as soon as I feel anything, I'm like, uh-oh, oh no,
Mm.
danger. And
Mm.
I know now through my, work with folks and my training and my own healing work is like, don't try to grip it so tightly. Just observe. and breathe into that space, and where can we ask permission to go further? It maybe today that's not available, and we can respect that. And those are days where, I'm doing less bouncing, I'm doing less movement in the ways that I thought like that going in and being intense all the time was the antidote, and like that was really just an amplifier, right? But in the moment you're again so adrenalized around that, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm getting in there, and it's like a false sense. You're just tearing things up.
Mm,
um Very much still on my own journey with lightening it up, being respectful and descending. There are days where I'm still like, no, 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 I have pain here. I need to get in there and figure it out, instead of, being much more gentle with myself, and the process of embodiment, which is not linear.
mm. I I'm thinking of the first trampoline and the intensity and breaking it. And I'm also thinking about my own anxiety about trampolines. I've watched some of them and people using them and thought, I'm never going to let my child use one of those. I may be like your anxious mother if I don't fix it. But in terms of maybe speak to this anxiety a little bit. Have you ever been injured doing trampoline and what does it look like? How high do you get? Do you hit your head on the ceiling? Like what's that
I,
like?
well, even when I broke it, I didn't injure myself. It was just a bit of stumbling of like, oh no, like I've done it now. But I was going very hard. I was like doing like squat jumps on it, which you can do, but like I was doing that repeatedly and while wearing sneakers, so just adding to the force of it.
Mm,
But now I'm barefoot on it. Again, most of the time I'm like not really leaving the mat too much. I'm just like bouncing up and down using
hmm
like shifting my weight back on my heels. But if I do go off of it to do like a star jump, or like, flinging my arms around or something, only going off a few inches. I have like relatively high ceilings, so I'm not at risk.
hmm
I'm 5'7", so maybe a 6 foot tall person would maybe bump their head. But I yeah, the I have seen people get injured, but on the larger trampolines, and
mm.
that's usually because, when my brother got injured, we had a sprinkler underneath it. So it was like
Oh, like it was
it was
wet.
like quite literally a slip and slide, and it was just not yeah, no, we were not being attended to by the adults. Maybe they would have intervened if they knew what we were doing. But
Yes.
yeah,
Playful Subversions does not endorse this particular behavior.
yeah. And he injured himself pretty badly. So I
Mm,
understand why my mom did not want us to. And I know that the larger trampolines are like an insurance liability or something, but
mm,
um I I think that, any mechanism that allows people to access something that is completely detached from productivity, or like
mm,
I personally am not using it as like a workout exercise
hmm
thing. It's more just like a part of how I'm moving through the day,
hmm
especially when I'm more confined to, being tethered to the computer or doing like it just gives me, instead of going all the way outside, which I
hmm
try to do as well, like go on a walk and do other things, but it just gives me a few minutes to be back in my body if I'm noticing that I'm holding and gripping a lot. Because it's very easy for us to just choose to do nothing,
mm,
and just stay detached. So for me, it's like, okay, 3 to 5 minutes, let's just jumping around doing that. Um, but yeah, it's not, again, it's over here with all my other, like my foam rollers, my yoga mat, all the other all of the wellness apparatus stuff lives in the same space in my apartment. But
mm,
if I ever move to a place where I can have a full-size trampoline, I might
hmm
invest in that as well. We'll see.
And are you on the first floor or the second floor? Or do people
So
complain about your bouncing or?
no, no, no. So this is another. I am on the second floor, but this was like a huge thing because I'm like, I think I resisted getting a trampoline at first because I was like, oh, I can't have that on a second floor, even though we have
hmm
mats in the area where we like exercise, or if we're going to be stomping around up here, which we're not doing. But where the trampoline sits is actually right in the like auxiliary stairwell for my
Mm.
downstairs neighbor. So it's not above a bedroom. And I checked with them.
Hmm.
I was like, I'm gonna get this thing and it's like I might be bouncing and like please tell me if you can hear it. I will not do it. And for a while I was doing it outside. Like I brought it out on our porch and was doing it out there
Mm.
where like not bothering anyone. But I check in with them about noise anyway, because my dog sometimes will be zooming around at 10 p.m. and they're like, oh, we can't hear them. And they're
Mm.
also up very late and they're easygoing people that I keep the lines open for them to tell me if I'm ever disruptive. But I have like, I don't know how many inches of mat underneath it. So nothing is creaking. None of our
Mm.
floorboards are creaking or anything like that. So, but yeah, if you live in one of the newer constructions that are like not well reinforced,
Mm.
probably would be like the ultimate neighbor annoyance. But if you live on a first floor, I wouldn't imagine that would be an issue.
So, if you are not able to have a trampoline in your apartment, what would you advise people to do?
Oh, I mean, that makes me sad for you, but there's another so anytime I'm without it, which is if I'm traveling, of course, or at someone else's house and staying over there and like, it's not I can't anything that I it wasn't always this way, but anything I add into my life to facilitate and support myself, I try to make it as flexible as possible so that I'm
Hmm.
not like experiencing this desperation when I'm without it. Like I
Hmm.
am attached to the the routine of the trampoline, but like things aren't unraveling if I go a day without it.
Hmm.
Just bouncing in the morning, like doing the lymphatic flow of like a little bit of Tai Chi
Mm.
energetics, just getting things flowing. People could jump up and down on a yoga mat or a carpet or just get things flowing, dropping the
Hmm.
shoulders, loosening up through the hips. I mean, dancing really is
Mm.
a great alternative to just kind of like being in the body. I if I'm listening to music while I'm on the trampoline, I'll sometimes be dancing on there.
Mm.
So it's adaptive in that way. Of course, like the joint support that you're getting from the trampoline is very helpful. But if you don't have access to it, your life isn't, your life will be better with it, I think. But
Mm.
if you can't have one, there's many other ways. I think any ways that you can find your way back into your body that feel aligned with your energy, not forcing anything
Mm.
like, oh, this is what I should be doing to feel better. Instead, like take a second to tune in and follow the flow of whatever whatever that might be. Like if you are working with constriction, like breathing into that space and like bouncing around within yourself internally with breath
Mhm.
before externalizing it in movement can be
Mhm.
helpful, I found,
Mm.
especially if there's like a lot of fear in the body around expansion.
Mm.
So just getting playful and not like being, for me anyway, I think I struggled for such a long time with like being witnessed doing anything that wasn't like completely perfect. Like I can't, okay, this product of me
Mhm.
cannot be witnessed until I have it exactly right. And there's something like just inherently foolish about like being a grown woman jumping on a mini trampoline in
Right.
my apartment. That's just like, it doesn't, it's like, and I don't mind if people see me on, no one's really walking around except people who love me who are in my apartment. So
Mm.
it's different, but I think if you can first witness yourself doing something that feels maybe a little bit out of the ordinary for
Mhm.
yourself and your body and witnessing that with a lot of compassion in that observance, like, oh, okay, like just noticing that's what this feels like, less about what it looks like. I do that often when I'm teaching yoga. I encourage people to close their eyes, especially when we're first down doing grounding on the mat,
Mhm.
just like waving around the spine, like in like the
Mm.
felt sense of embodying water, just like
Mm.
moving yourself around. No one's looking, no one cares. Everyone is focused on themselves,
Right.
right? And including me, like when I'm teaching, like there's this duality of like, I need to be in my body to know what it's feeling like for me and feeling where I might be holding or resistance
Mhm.
might be being, but I also have to make sure no one's hurting themselves or doing anything. But when you're down on the mat and grounded in any type of way, whether it's like, your 2 feet on the ground, or all fours, just encouraging that witnessing to be really non-judgmental and
Mm,
seeing what shows up there for the flow of things. Because if you can open up that space of, huh, that's interesting, the
mm,
curiosity, instead of controlling it so tightly, um, obviously the trampoline facilitates that freedom, but you can access it in other ways by just tuning in and returning to that over and
mm,
over again of here I am, this is what I'm feeling, getting curious about the sensation as opposed to whatever story you're telling yourself about, oh, I'm not a person who moves this way. It's
mhm.
like, well, what if right here in this moment I tend to something that I didn't even know was there and I water it a bit and see what flows.
It's fascinating when you were talking about holding your breath and doing the trampoline with your breath full. I realized, wow, it never occurred to me that I could do that. It never occurred to me that was an option that my body was allowed to do. I was on this setting of inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Everything needs to be homogeneous. It's that sort of learned compliance. And you're talking about one of the things this podcast is all about, which is, using play to form patterns of resistance, or break down patterns of compliance with resistance is probably a better way of saying it. And I'm thinking about resistance in terms of the trampoline as basically you're resisting gravity. Like that's every time you bounce, that's an act of resistance.
Yeah, I hadn't fully thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. I think when I am on it and especially when I close my eyes, like, and there can be this moment of if I'm, getting a little more air and I'm like allowing myself to be in a star position and expansive with my eyes closed,
Mm,
there is that sort of like danger element that can come in of like, uh-oh. But
mm,
then I find that like if I come back into trust of like, I know exactly where I am
mm,
and I'm really embracing that freedom of
mm,
resist of like my I feel that my source energy is very free.
mm,
Like
mm,
my self energy is very playful and free, but there's been so many layers and I think many people experience this of like this confinement, this constriction, compliance that you're speaking to of like, this is how we behave and this is
mhm,
how you are good. And it's like, I don't actually believe that. I
mhm,
think I'm most good when I'm myself and I have the greatest access to that embodiment. Um, and I think there are so many things that bring our attention away from ourselves and colonize our attention and
mm,
tell us, and that are like so far removed from are like the essential magic and the
mm.
the real felt sense that we're born with of like, oh, I'm all that I need. Not that we don't need connection and community, but like
Right,
that is where we're actually accessing connection with other people. It's not anything that we can consume or be confined by.
right.
So even though yes, I bought this trampoline to help facilitate that, I think more importantly, people can access that same freedom
Mm,
without purchasing anything. You can go out and bounce on the grass, right? But
mm,
when I originally got connected to the trampoline, again, we were in lockdown, not as much access to outside, living in a city, so it helped me get back into my body in that way. But yeah, I think I'm still very much in the process of peeling back those layers of
mm,
uh, me being the one confining myself to an idea of how to be professional, how to, and I'm like, no, 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 like inserting the play as much as possible is how we come back into ourselves and
mm,
how we help clients do the same, how we help our communities be connected to ourselves and each other.
mm,
And yeah, it can seem like, um, there are many pathways for us to do that
mm,
require a lot of consumption.
mm.
But I think, again, separate from purchasing the trampoline, I really do believe that people already have access to that within themselves if they just want to come into their bodies in any ways
Mm.
that are available to them.
So I have this image as you were talking about this, and as we were talking about resistance, I was of course thinking of the frog the frogs of Portland in the frog suits. I don't know if you've been seeing those outfits.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'm hoping someone out there is listening to this and that they get a trampoline so that the frogs can be facing off ice, bouncing. And if you don't have a trampoline, as you're saying, frogs can just bounce. There's something. I mean, you've done a really good job of sort of talking about the internal experience, and I want to shift it just a teeny bit before we finish today about the political, which is it is a form of resistance. To look, I don't I want to be careful how I say this. When I say to look ridiculous, as if someone there is ready to ridicule us, right? Like someone wants us to comply and look professional, look serious, be a certain way, and you're sort of leaning into that, being like, no, this is bouncing. I don't look whatever professional is. This is just bouncing.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, at least in my experience in my circles, struggle with that. Again, going back to that witnessing, like
Mhm.
the internal observer being very harsh, and
Mhm.
then immediately assuming anytime you get an inch out of the confinement that you've decided is like that you're conscripted to, like, oh, let me edge out a little bit. People have a lot of trauma around being seen in that way and being
Mhm.
seen as like messy and imperfect and human. And I think if we can tend to that first within ourselves and be expansive and have courage to like look however, um, that creates inevitably more space for other people to be like, oh, I can do that too, and I can
Mhm.
be witnessed in the world, and that we can create this sort of, much more curious, playful energy around it not being so serious all the time, even though things are very grave, right?
Mhm.
Like everything feels so heavy constantly. At least that's the felt sense that like
Yeah.
I'm waking up with more heaviness. I know
Mhm.
that people that I'm talking to every day are just experiencing this sort of holding this weightedness that's only amplifying. And so I think if we can do anything in our waking lives to engage in play and to be observed and witnessed doing
Mhm.
that in public, in community with other people, and like showing up as free,
Mhm.
that has, I have to believe that has an energetic, domino effect of like, oh, actually, yes, no, I remember I am free and I
Mhm.
can do whatever. And like, no one gets to colonize how I am emoting. I am choosing this. And,
Mhm.
I think if you're especially in a privileged body, it's important to do that. Like, if you have the ability to move through the world with, more structural ease, like it's kind of on you to to be as
Mhm.
big and expansive as possible and unencumbered by, it's your responsibility, at least for me, the way I view it, to like work through my own hangups, my own shame, so that
Mhm.
I can show up more fully, take up more space, clear the way, clear the
Mhm.
brush away of all the bullshit, and
Mhm.
just really reconnect to, um, you know, the our shared humanity of being playful and connected and not being entrenched in deep suffering and that disconnection and disembodiment.
Mhm.
I think a lot of our problems stem from that disconnection of it all being held up here
Mhm.
and nothing being this felt sense of our energetic connection with ourselves, our bodies, and other
Mhm.
people.
You're raising such an interesting point in terms of power and oppression and privilege. How dare I not bounce if I have that ability? How dare I not feel my body from head to toe if I have access to that? Um, are there ways that trampolining has shifted your own relationship to power and privilege and oppression?
Huh. I don't know if I have ever thought of it that way. More so in my relationship with my own body and the privileges of having, like, it's not that I'm without, complicated, like my own health complications or anything that might come up. And, we're in a meat sack that is eroding as we're talking here. But when I first got the trampoline, I was working in an environment where there was a lot of physical suffering. And I found that I felt this sort of like momentum and urgency to like be more connected with my body and like
Mm,
it being brought into sharp relief of, oh, you can do this, you can feel this way. And then I had an injury a few years ago that it made me like so grateful that
mm,
I recovered from, but I was like, oh my God, like I never want to not have access to my body in this way again. So, I think in terms of like my relationship with like being able-bodied,
mm,
it I feel for me it helps me feel very connected to the gratitude that like have to have around that in order
mm,
to not get caught up in the million ways I could feel bad about my body or movement or like, oh, I don't have this or it doesn't feel this way or I don't look this way and more so coming
mm,
back into like this felt sense is what I'm trying to access. And it is a privilege that I get to do that and be free here in the space
mm,
and quite literally, I'm choosing to do this. I like
mhm,
I'm moving through my day and I have full freedom. And in like trampolining is just a small component of embracing that freedom
mhm,
in kind of a silly way. But I think movement in general and being in our bodies is something that, and I teach this in yoga as well, of people really honoring whatever their body has on offer, and there not being a right way to be moving in your body through the
mm,
world. And also honoring other people's bodies and not being judgmental or, you know, comparing what you can do versus what someone else can do and casting, just layers of disconnect onto that. I don't know that I'm consciously always thinking about the trampoline as a component of that, but maybe I'll be thinking about that more after this conversation.
Well, part of what you're saying is, you're reminded that you have a choice of what to do with your body in space. You're reminded that you have a choice about how you use your abilities, what you can do. And so much, I think, today we are getting messages that we don't have choices, we don't have power. And so this is sort of one of the things that I'm thinking about as we sort of finish up. We are going to have to stop in a sec, but I did want to share, as podcast listeners know, Brittany is doing this for fun and for free, but she has a couple of um, nonprofits that she wants to let us know about that you can donate to if you wish. And the first one that you have here is called Somerville Fridge. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so this is mutual aid, completely community funded, local. There's a few different locations, and you can find it on the link tree. But I live and work here in Somerville, and you can either like physically donate items if you're local and in the area. There's a fridge in Medford as well, but just a way of really low barrier access to food. There's a fridge and then also a pantry portion of it. So people aren't encumbered by like, any sort of like red tape around accessing food. And especially with the government shutdown and the SNAP benefits and the cascading impact of that,
Mm,
really important to give abundantly and locally within your community. So if this is not something that it resonates with people, or if they feel inspired to look into if their own communities have a lot of these fridges and mutual aid networks popped up more expansively in 2020, as I'm sure
mm,
some people are aware. And I think there was a little bit of a lull there for a bit, but now again, a lot of people getting reactivated around volunteering and contributing.
mm,
So again, you can either donate monetarily or give food or do it locally for your area.
mm. And then the other one you picked was Mutual Aid Mamas. Can you tell us a little about what that is?
Yeah. So similarly to the Fridge, this is really a low barrier mutual aid network. Do a lot of great work in the greater Somerville, Medford area. A few different tiers or different um, spheres rather of how they support community members through clothing drive, donation, food as well, transportation. just really being community centered in the work that they're doing. And they were able to get the tax exempt donation status. So you can donate monetarily, or again, if you're local to Somerville or Medford area, Cambridge even, donating items. They do clothing drives or other ways to donate time, energy, resources, money. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight those two very local organizations.
That is great, and we will include those at the end of the podcast. And now, at the risk of sounding like a dad joke, given the topic today, we have to bounce. We have come to the end of the podcast, but I hope folks will check out Brittany's website and her practice. Brittany Robertson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.